What if I told you there was a basketball coach who refused to play offense but still outscored everyone? Yes, a strategy that the NBA had never seen before and that many believed would never work ended up becoming the reason that Larry Brown won the most legendary NBA title in history. But then you wonder, how did he pull this all off? And how is it possible that a team with no MVPs or superstars completely destroyed the best team in the league? Well, to understand Larry Brown's genius, we have to go back to the very beginning of the modern NBA. Larry Brown's journey to coaching greatness began long before he stepped foot on an NBA court as a coach. In fact, his playing career laid the foundation for his future success. Brown was a standout point guard at the University of North Carolina. After also winning a gold medal for Team USA in the 1964 Olympics, he then went on to play professionally in the ABA, where he was a 3-time All-Star and led the league in assists 3 times. The ABA was another basketball league that would later merge with the NBA. The 4 teams that would do so, you may have heard of them: the Nets, the San Antonio Spurs, the Indiana Pacers, and the Denver Nuggets. And not only would Brown coach the Spurs as well as the Pacers, he also would coach the Nuggets for 5 years in the 70s. Brown's coaching legacy truly kicked off at UCLA in 1979. It was here at college where he quickly made a name for himself. In just his second season, he led the Bruins to the college championship game in 1980. It was an impressive feat for such a young coach, even if they did not win, something Brown would endure many times in his career. His next job would have him taking over the head coach position at the University of Kansas in 1983. And again, his impact was immediate. Under the previous coach, no success. Under Brown, a lot of success, improving their record every single year. But it was in 1987 and 1988 that the team made history, with Larry Brown leading them to an improbable college championship and with himself winning Coach of the Year. Now, despite a slow start to the season, Kansas would rally to win that national title in dramatic fashion, defeating the region's #1 seed Oklahoma in the final. This may seem irrelevant to an NBA coach, but this championship season has a remarkable similarity to Brown's tenure with the Detroit Pistons in the 2000s. It was here at Kansas that Brown began to develop his unique coaching style, laying the groundwork for the strategies that would later shock the NBA. But how would this translate to the professional level? And how would he develop his unique strategy into a championship-winning idea? Following his college success, Brown's transition to the NBA wouldn't be as smooth sailing as he thought it might be. His return to the professional leagues came with the San Antonio Spurs. The nature of the NBA game was obviously different: faster, more physical, and filled with bigger egos. For a teacher and coach like Brown, this created the challenge of adapting his college coaching style to the NBA, where individual talent often overshadowed team play. But Larry Brown was nothing if not persistent. With such a long career, he stuck to his basketball fundamental beliefs, demanding that his players buy into a system of selfless basketball. It wasn't always popular, and it certainly wasn't easy. Star players often chafed under Brown's strict approach. His desire to practice hard, harder, and yet even harder would create friction within teams.
Well, I think they get so angry at me that they learn to love each other and bond.
There you go.
I hope they understand the difference between coaching and criticism. That's really a key. And they had to make sacrifices.
Slowly but surely, results started to show. Under Brown's guidance, the Spurs transformed from a struggling franchise into a playoff contender. In just his second year with the team, Brown led the Spurs to a 56-win record, a massive improvement from the 21-win record in the previous season. The key? Well, half of the key? A suffocating defense that gave opponents fits. The other half was the legendary David Admiral Robinson returning from Navy duty, and him winning Rookie of the Year and being an all-time player. But that's what Brown has said about great coaches.
You know, I think a coach's challenge is to get kids to play as well as they're capable of playing. Get them to understand, do what they do best.
See, Larry Brown had a bit of a weakness. It was his belief that sometimes his positive influence was not always the reason for success. At the time, he stated, "In San Antonio, we won 21 games in my first year, and that never satisfied our owner. From day one, I felt he made a terrible mistake in hiring me, and no matter what we did after that, I always felt that was the case. I don't know if our players in San Antonio ever felt that I was in control of the basketball end." However, Brown had good results with the Spurs, and this proved that his team-first approach could work in the NBA. But it also highlighted the challenges he would face throughout his career when you have a completely weird perspective on how to play the game compared to what other players are used to. How could he convince NBA superstars used to having the ball in their hands and putting up big scoring numbers to buy into a system that prioritized defense and ball movement? How could he have the success that would make fans enjoy watching it and players enjoy playing it? This question would follow Brown throughout his NBA career, and as he moved from team to team in the NBA, he became known as a coach who could turn around struggling franchises, a basketball doctor of sorts. But he also gained a reputation for being hard to please, taking away an individual player's desires for how they feel they should be playing, and always pushing his players to reach for a standard of perfection that seemed impossible to achieve, which is something he recognized.
I am demanding. I do get on kids.
Brown's perfectionism would bring regular season success, but also contribute to his frequent job changes. He was always looking for the next challenge, the next team he could mold into a powerhouse. But his greatest test to his theories were to come, and his desire for the greatest achievement of an NBA championship could be destroyed before he even came close. Something had to change. After a successful stint with the Spurs, Brown had a brief stop with the Los Angeles Clippers, that always seems to be the case with that franchise, before joining the Pacers, where he was about to put his theory to the ultimate test. Brown's approach on playing the right way had been used to describe him at this point for decades, but what exactly did playing the right way even mean? For Brown, it meant selfless play, making the extra pass, setting hard screens, and always putting the team's success above individual glory. This right-way approach to the game would become Brown's trademark, earning him respect and occasionally frustration from players and fellow coaches alike. This philosophy was a stark contrast to the balanced strategies of offense and defense that dominated the NBA at the time. Brown's defensive schemes were intricate and demanding. He expected every player to be accountable on defense, to communicate constantly, and to be willing to sacrifice their bodies for the team. And in a player-driven league where people are always looking for that next contract and to maximize their careers, that doesn't always take well. However, there's one cure to all of this, and that, my friends, is winning. The results once more spoke for themselves. Under Brown's guidance, the Pacers immediately and without hesitation transformed into one of the toughest defensive teams in the league. They frustrated opponents with their tenacious defense, often holding high-scoring teams well below their season averages. The Pacers would be a top 10 defense in all the seasons while under Larry Brown and peak a top 4 defense in their second year. Now, you couple this with the lethal shooting and scoring of Reggie Miller, their potential was very high. It was now time in these mid-90s to fully embrace who he was as a coach. It was time for Larry Brown to outright state what he wanted to be. His unique strategy could be summarized like this. While other teams were trying to outscore their opponents, Brown was teaching his players on how to stop them from scoring in the first place while almost entirely ignoring offense. It was a bold strategy when the leading teams were scoring 10 to 13 more points than the Pacers he was coaching. However, Larry Brown was so convinced it was a path to success, the more the teams won, the more they bought in, the more they followed Brown. Now, their success under Brown was impressive, but it wasn't without its challenges. Sometimes you have the shadow of Mordor, and sometimes you have the shadow of the Eastern Conference. In his first season with the team, they would go to the conference finals and lose ultimately in 7 games to the Knicks. They would lose in the finals, but Larry Brown was convinced they could come back and do it again, and that they did. They reached the conference finals in his second season with the Pacers, but then they lost to the Magic. Now, to lose 2 years in a row in the conference finals in 7 games, that does take its toll on a coach and a team, and as such, Larry Brown and the Pacers did not have exactly the best third season, but the near trips to the finals and the great success in his first 2 seasons were a justification of Brown's philosophies as well as to his strategies. It showed that a team committed to teamwork and to their coach and who bought in could reach the peak level of competition. Brown's impact wasn't just about X's and O's, however. He was changing the culture of the teams he coached, instilling a sense of pride in their fundamental play. He would often say, defense is about effort and desire. Anyone can play defense if they're willing to work at it. This mentality began to seep into every aspect of his teams. It was finally time for Brown to fully dive into his philosophies and the culture he wanted to create. And the secret ingredient of this philosophy was, I do not like offense. How can a coach expect to win without any proper systems to maximize scoring? Well, you see, Brown's defensive focus didn't mean he neglected offense entirely. Instead, he believed that good defense would lead to easy offense. By forcing turnovers and getting stops, his teams could score in transition before the opposing defense could set up. It was a different way of thinking about scoring at the time, and one that prioritized efficiency over volume. And if you are familiar with the modern NBA, you know about the obsession with efficiency metrics, and you would also like to know that this period of time in the 90s wasn't that efficient. So how would this idea play out for his goals of a championship? He would then leave the Pacers in the same way he did other teams, blaming himself for the team failing to reach the pinnacle. However, his next adventure would be the greatest challenge yet. Could he convince an upcoming star, a lethal offensive weapon, to buy into his defensive system? And what would happen when his disciplined approach collided with one of the most dynamic and unpredictable players in NBA history? Coach Larry Brown signing for the Philadelphia 76ers would push his coaching style to its absolute limits. The clash or fusion between his strict team-first mindset and upcoming star Allen Iverson's free-spirited play would be an absolute sight to behold. Iverson was to become a scoring phenomenon, known for his incredible speed, crossover dribble, and fearless attacking style. He was also notorious for his off-the-court antics and resistance to authority. It was clear, even at the beginning, that Brown and Iverson's relationship would be complex. Their conflicting styles led to a numerous amount of clashes both on and off the court over the years, but not before Iverson's star began to grow and grow, racking up highlight reels, grabbing his first of 4 scoring titles at only 23, and showing the flashes of the brilliance, the entertainment, and the grit necessary to be a champion and a future MVP.
I think he really does want us to win, and I believe in his heart he would love to sacrifice a scoring title or an all-star berth.
Despite their differences, Brown worked tirelessly to channel Iverson's ability into a more positive, team-oriented approach. He pushed Iverson to improve his defensive skills and to make better decisions with the ball. This was obviously not an easy process, and there were plenty of heated arguments along the way.
Y'all know me, you take me out for 2 minutes, and I get upset about it not because I'm selfish or anything like that. I'm just competitive, and I want to be out there on the floor helping my teammates.
But as they spent season upon season together, something remarkable began to happen. Iverson, despite his initial resistance, started to buy into Brown's system completely. He began to understand that by playing within the team concept, he could not just elevate his own game, but the entire team's. Obviously, you look at the stats and the amount of times he shot, you wouldn't think that would be the case, but as we've already established, Brown didn't concern himself too much with the offensive side. For his part, it was learning to adapt his coaching style to accommodate Iverson's unique talents. And the results were nothing short of spectacular. Under Brown's guidance, Iverson transformed from a pure scorer into a more complete player. In the 2001 season, Iverson was named the NBA's most valuable player, achieving what Brown promised him, averaging 31 points per game to lead the league.
Now I can look in his eye, and he can look in my eyes, and we see the same thing. We got the same agenda.
Philadelphia had also tied the second best record in the league with the Lakers, but more importantly, Iverson and Brown also led the 76ers to the NBA Finals, something he had failed to do with the Pacers many years earlier. Allen Iverson later credited Brown for this transformation. "He helped me become the MVP," he said. "He helped me become a better player, a better person, a better icon." This acknowledgement from one of the league's most individualistic players was a credit to Brown's coaching ability and his unwavering commitment to his own philosophy. However, there was still one job left to do. The 2001 NBA Finals saw Brown and Iverson 76ers facing off against the formidable Los Angeles Lakers, led by Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant, the defending champions. The series was a David vs. Goliath matchup, with the scrappy, defensive-minded Sixers taking on the offensive juggernaut of the Lakers. A battle of not only coaching legends, but of coaching philosophies. Game 1 of the series produced one of the most iconic moments in NBA history. Iverson, embodying the never-say-die spirit Brown had instilled in the team, scored 48 points and led the 76ers to a stunning overtime victory, the first loss for the Lakers in these playoffs. The lasting image of Iverson stepping over a fallen Tyronn Lue after hitting a clutch shot became symbolic of the 76ers' underdog status. Could this be the moment that Brown had been waiting for? Could the 76ers defeat the Lakers before they could become a dynasty? A nice thought, but the Lakers' superior talent would unfortunately prevail, and they won the series in 5 games in a commanding fashion. They were just too good, too dominant. Despite the loss, the 76ers' run to the finals was another validation of Brown's coaching philosophy. He had taken a team led by an unconventional superstar and molded them into a defensive powerhouse that could compete with the best in the league. The years following the finals appearance were marked by continued tension between Brown and Iverson, but also by mutual respect. Brown continued to push him more to improve, while Iverson's incredible performances kept the 76ers competitive. However, their relationship was a constant balancing act, with periods of conflict followed by periods of reconciliation. One of the most infamous moments of the relationship came during a press conference in 2002. Yeah, you know the one.
About practice. I mean, listen, we talking about practice. I know I'm supposed to be there. I know I'm supposed to lead by example. I know that. And I'm not shoving it aside, like it don't mean anything. What are we talking about? Practice?
This moment showed the fundamental disconnect between Brown's regimented approach and Iverson's anti-authority personality, but also why he has difficulty having his teams committed for longer periods of time. They had achieved greatness, but once more, Larry Brown had come short against a Phil Jackson three-peating dynasty. Fusing an offensively talented player with his defensive system brought him closer than ever before to that elusive title. Despite the team's success, the constant clashes with Iverson and management had taken their toll. In 2003, Brown left Philadelphia with a mix of pride in what he had accomplished and frustration in not being able to bring a championship to the city. His experience with the 76ers and Iverson had taught him a valuable lesson about his coaching style and adapting it to different personalities, while still maintaining his core basketball principles. That would be important because on his next coaching stop, he would face his greatest challenge against a dominant, legendary super team. When Larry Brown took over as head coach of the Detroit Pistons in 2003, he inherited a team that many considered underwhelming but had performed well in terms of the standings. There was no superstar, no MVP candidate, but Larry Brown saw potential where others saw mediocrity. The point guard, Chauncey Billups, known as Mr. Big Shot, had bounced around the league before finding a home in Detroit. Rip Hamilton was a solid scorer, but far from a household name. Tayshaun Prince was a lanky defender with limited offensive skills, and Ben Wallace, despite his defensive prowess, was severely undersized for a center at 6'9". That being said, when you win 4 Defensive Player of the Year awards in a 5-year stretch, you're probably a bit of a savant. But his offense? The opposite. How did Brown turn this ragtag group into one of the most formidable defenses in NBA history? And would his absolute distaste in offensive systems, without an Allen Iverson to make magic happen, prevent him from making Detroit a contender? Early in the season, there was a significant resistance to Brown's coaching style. Chauncey Billups in particular struggled to buy into his system. The team's offense was sputtering, and their defense hadn't yet reached its full potential. Many observers wrote off the Pistons as an average team with no real chance at a championship. However, it is important to note that towards the end of the regular season, the Pistons had a game against the Nuggets where they prevented them from scoring for 22 straight possessions. That is outrageous. Now, you don't have to score very much to defeat a team scoring 0 points over a period of time. However, some system was at least necessary. It would be based on transition and screens. Not flashy, but effective. Larry Brown emphasized ball movement and smart shot selection. Players were encouraged to make the extra pass and find the open man, rather than forcing contested shots. This unselfish approach allowed the Pistons to maximize their limited offensive talent and find ways to score just enough to support their dominant defense. Naturally, this would cause a lot of chaos earlier in the season, but it would also continue in the playoffs, and Rip Hamilton had to be the mediator between Billups, who wanted to score more, and Brown, who hated three-pointers. I had like 29, 10 assists, 9 rebounds, 2 turnovers, and almost like hit the shot to win the game. And we were celebrating running through the tunnel. I look back and Larry Brown is shaking his head in disgust. I'm like, what the hell? So I go back there and I'm like, LB, are you alright? What's up? The dude looks at me in my eyes, disgusted, and says, you have no idea how to play this position for me. Literally, I couldn't believe it, Billups continued. I thought I had the best game. I thought I was amazing. He sat there and told me that, and I said, this shit ain't gonna work. I'm notoriously hard on point guards, Brown said, but I hope I was fair. It's about the point guard being an extension of the coaching staff. My idea point guard play for Chauncey is different than he played in the past. With us, he had to make unbelievable sacrifices, and it was difficult at first. This continued really until the turning point came with the acquisition of Rasheed Wallace in February of 2004. Wallace's arrival provided the Pistons with a versatile big man who could score, defend, and run. More importantly, his presence allowed Brown to fully implement his defensive schemes with the right personnel. The Pistons began to gel, with each player understanding and embracing their role within the team concept. They allowed just 84.3 points per game, the best in the league. But on this team, Brown didn't have an Iverson, and his emphasis on defense did come at a cost. The Pistons' offense, far from prolific, averaging only 90 points per game, ranking 24th out of 29 teams. This massive contrast between their offense and defensive rankings led many to question whether the Pistons could truly compete for a championship. How could a team that struggled to score expect to beat the high-powered offenses of the other conference? Well, it can be explained like this. The Pistons' defensive strategy was multifaceted. They employed a disciplined help defensive system where players were constantly rotating and covering for each other. This approach made it difficult for opponents to find open shots or to exploit mismatches. Additionally, the Pistons' big men, anchored by Ben Wallace, excelled at protecting the rim and altering shots. Around the three-point line, players like Tayshaun Prince and Richard Hamilton used their length and quickness to disrupt passing and to contest shots. This combination of interior presence and outside pressure made it incredibly difficult for opponents to find any rhythm offensively. But perhaps the most crucial aspect of the Pistons' defensive success was their mental toughness. Brown had instilled in this team a belief that defense was not just about physical ability, but about effort and desire. Something he had tried to get all his teams throughout his entire career to buy into with this degree of intensity. This was important because it allowed them to win games even when their shots weren't falling, and with this, Brown became more intense himself. He believed that if his team defended, rebounded, shared the ball, and played hard, they could be successful. He did not need a superstar to score 20 or 30 points. This philosophy became the Pistons' mantra, and as the season progressed, the players continually bought into his vision the more success they had, and also driven by the knowledge that he had taken Iverson to the finals not 3 years earlier. Why not them also? Thanks to Brown's coaching and training camp-like practices, and despite their offensive limitations, the Detroit Pistons finished with 54 wins, good for the third seed in the Eastern Conference playoffs. And nothing says we are coming for that title like their opening playoff game against the Bucks. They dominated in a 108-82-point blowout win by forcing 24 turnovers against a Bucks team that had been one of the best in the league at protecting the ball during the regular season.
Throws it away, Ben, ahead to Lindsey, great catch, and dish, oh!
As the playoffs progressed, the Pistons' defensive dominance became more and more apparent. They held opponents to historically low scoring totals, frustrating star players and disrupting offensive game plans. Teams that had averaged over 100 points per game during the regular season found themselves struggling to break 80 points against the Pistons. This continued dominance would allow them to take over the Eastern Conference bracket and set up a finals matchup against the dynasty of Kobe and Shaq's Lakers. This would be another classic David and Goliath showdown between Larry Brown and Phil Jackson. Could Larry Brown's philosophies really win championships at the highest level? The Lakers entered the series as heavy favorites, boasting a lineup that seemed unstoppable on paper. Shaquille O'Neal, Kobe Bryant, Gary Payton, and Karl Malone formed a quartet of future Hall of Famers that had many predicting a Lakers sweep. But Larry Brown and his Pistons had other plans. From the opening tip of Game 1, it was clear that this series would be different. The Pistons' suffocating defense frustrated the Lakers' high-powered offense, holding them to just 75 points in an absolute stunning Game 1 upset. And for what many expected to be a really dominant performance by the Lakers, this Game 1 win set the tone for what would become one of the most dominant defensive performances in NBA Finals history. The Lakers won Game 2 in a clutch shot by Kobe Bryant, but in Game 3, the Pistons held the Lakers to a mere 68 points, the lowest scoring total in Finals history. The Pistons' defensive rotations were crisp, their communication was flawless, and their effort was relentless. Coach Brown crafted a brilliant defensive strategy to contain the dominant duo of Shaq and Kobe.
See, what they did, the whole strategy was move the pressure up. Yeah. If you move the pressure up, it takes away Shaquille as a threat, because now they have to harbor the ball up the court with pressure on the perimeter. So now that forces Shaq up. So now if he has to catch the ball at the top of the key for our automatics, he's not in the paint. Now that takes up all the seconds, all the time in the world to be able to trap him. Now you got to swing it. Now you're running late on clock. You got to force up a shot. And that was their whole plan.
Ultimately, the Pistons' team-oriented defense held both stars in check, leading to a series victory in just 5 games. Domination, really. Chauncey Billups lived up to his moniker, Mr. Big Shot, with clutch performances throughout the series, and he outjeweled the Lakers' star-studded team, which earned him Finals MVP honors. And the attitude of Larry Brown had truly taken over his team.
The only thing as a point guard that matters is winning, right? So if I win, say you got 28 and 12, I got 18 and 11, but I won a matchup.
As absolute underdogs, Detroit's triumph over the Lakers is widely regarded as one of the greatest upsets in NBA Finals history. They proved that a team without a single superstar could defeat a squad of future Hall of Famers, and by doing so would become Hall of Famers themselves. But the story for Larry Brown and the Pistons wouldn't end there, because now ambition had been ignited. Could a team like this establish a dynasty in the modern NBA? The 2005 season would put this question to the test with unexpected twists that would shape Brown's legacy forever, and not always for the better. Repeating as NBA champions is actually one of the most challenging feats in professional sports. Only a handful of coaches have managed to do this, with Phil Jackson being the undisputed master of the art, having 3 separate three-peats and yet an additional repeat. And now Larry Brown faced the daunting task of joining this elite club. The 2004-2005 season started with high expectations for the defending champions. Brown's Pistons continued to embody his defensive philosophy, stifling opponents with a suffocating play. They finished the regular season with an impressive 54-28 record, securing the 2nd seed in the Eastern Conference. Their defense remained elite, allowing just 89.5 points per game, the best in the league. As the playoffs began, the Pistons seemed poised for another deep playoff run. They dispatched the Philadelphia 76ers in 5 games in the first round, with Larry Brown battling against his former star Allen Iverson, knowing exactly how to defeat him. Then he overcame the Indiana Pacers in a hard-fought 6-game series, another former team of his. And in the Eastern Conference Finals, they faced a tough Miami Heat team led by Shaquille O'Neal, who had moved teams, and the young upstart Dwayne Wade. This series went the full 7 games, with the Pistons ultimately prevailing. However, the 2005 NBA Finals pitted the Pistons against the San Antonio Spurs, a team that shared many similarities with Detroit. After the Pistons went down 0-2, they managed to even up the series and were seconds away from winning Game 5 in overtime and taking a commanding 3-2 series lead. Billups, the Finals MVP from the previous year, was left out on a crucial play at the end of overtime.
To Ori for 3. Oh, unbelievable! This guy is.
This Game 5 loss would prove devastating. They did manage to win Game 6, but in Game 7 the Spurs emerged victorious and denying Larry Brown and the Pistons their shot at a repeat championship. The missed opportunity was a bitter pill to swallow for Brown and his team. In the aftermath of the Finals loss, Brown's relationship with the Pistons organization began to deteriorate. Rumors swirled about his interest in other coaching positions, once more the journeyman coach coming through, and tensions mounted between Brown and team management throughout the entire playoffs. How could they have focused on a title if Brown was already looking for his next project? In July 2005, Brown and the Pistons agreed to part ways. The split was bitter, with both sides expressing frustration over how the situation had unfolded. His departure marked the end of a remarkable 2-year run, though, that had seen the Pistons go from underdogs to champions. And yes, this championship would mean he is the only coach in history to win at the college level and the NBA level to this day. Now, his legacy isn't without controversy, even as it is filled with greatness. Brown's teams consistently improved their defensive ratings everywhere he went, and his ability to turn underdog squads into contenders was unparalleled. Coach Larry Brown showed that a well-coached team with a clear identity could overcome even the most talented opponents. Many coaches and teams were going to emulate aspects of Brown's philosophy while installing those high-powered offenses that his lacked, but they still recognized the value of strong team defense and unselfish play. One such coach, however, rejected that philosophy and only wanted to score as many points as possible. Could he achieve the same level of success as Brown or Jackson? Click the video to find out.